The Talk Station presents Faith Matters, a look at contemporary stories and issues from a faith perspective. While this is a pre-recorded show, we are interested in your ideas, comments, and questions, and we urge you to email them to faithmatters@thetalkstation.com.
Give me faith, trust what you say, that you're good and your love is great. I'm broken inside, I give you my life.
And now on the Talk Station, Faith Matters.
And welcome to our program. I'm Ben Ball, and joined today by Reverend Robert Cornegie from Chapel by the Sea in Emerald Isle, also Bishop Doc Loomis, retired Anglican bishop, also Reverend Carl Zorowski from St. Peter's United Methodist Church. And welcome, folks. Good to have everybody here.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And let's get started as we take a look at some of the articles that we've been reviewing and pondering this week. As we see, we have one of the actions that have taken place recently. It really didn't get a lot of mainstream press. I mean, it wasn't the headline from that day in particular, but President Trump signed an executive order on religious liberty. And in the question from Michael Brown, who writes frequently for the Stream, stream.org, says, what are we to make of this long-awaited presidential executive order promoting free speech and religious liberty, which was the name of it? Many conservatives are deeply disappointed with the order, resulting in headlines like these. Trump's executive order on religious liberty is worse than useless, from David French. Or Ben Shapiro, my mistake, Trump's new executive order on religious freedom turns out to be an enormous dud. And then he goes on to say, perhaps Princeton law professor Robert P. George summed it up best. He tweeted, the religious liberty executive order is meaningless, but others were more positive. What Trump understands about religious liberty in America, from Todd Starnes. And Robert Jeffries writes, Trump is ending government assault on religious liberty. You know, executive orders are an interesting phenomenon, actually, because they generally are pretty narrow in scope. You would think they want to sound like they're broad, but they're generally fairly narrow in scope. Robert, do you think that this is a good move, or as one of the paragraphs is titled here, much ado about nothing?
Both.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, can it be both? It can be both. You know, he made a campaign promise that he was going to defend religious liberties. And so, you know, he sees this as his executive order, and we know about executive orders, that they're good as long as that executive is in order. But as soon as he's out of order, they're gone. As soon as somebody else comes in, they can be turned around. So from a political point of view, he needed to underscore his commitment to religious freedom. So this is the first step, as I see it.
As one of the comments was, it was the emergency brake.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it sets another tone. We've already seen just his talk about immigration and the border and tightening down and all of that has had a dramatic impact on those coming into the United States now illegally. I mean, the numbers are 60-70% reduction in the number of border crossings. I mean, it's phenomenal just from talking about it. So the bully pulpit of the president, the bully pulpit by the president can have a dramatic impact. So this is the beginning. He specified the Johnson Amendment. And of course, we've talked about that a number of times here on the program. And so as an executive order, the law has not been dealt with through Congress.
Yeah, it doesn't change the law.
No, all it does is tell the IRS not to enforce the penalize, the tax consequences of doing it. So basically, he has said it shall not be enforced under my administration. So now I don't know if somebody in Congress is going to pick that up and try to turn that around or not, but we'll see if he'll go take that next step to try to push that through.
From Southern Evangelical Seminary, Dr. Richard Land says that today's historic executive order restoring religious freedom across the nation was a crucial step in returning America's religious landscape to our founding fathers envisioned. What do you think, Carl? Is this a step? Is this a leap, a step, a crawl? Or is there more to do?
I think it's a baby step. I certainly wouldn't call it a leap. I pulled up the executive order and I read through it. Mm-hmm. And, if people were looking for drastic change to come from this executive order, they're not going to see it. Mm-hmm. But yet, it's good to have to hear the voice of a president say, yes, religious freedom matters to me, and not then be followed by some talk about how the Christian church is the problem.
This order certainly does not go as far as, like we talked about last week, the law in Indiana that talked about, just made a very common sense application to students for the fact that they do have religious liberty to speak about their faith or to include it in their work and their school and not be denigrated for that. But Doc, is this a step in the right direction? Do we go further with this? Or what do you think?
Every executive order really has two impacts. One is the potential legal impact, and the other is the psychological impact. So if I were to look at this executive order on its legal merit, I would say there's not a lot there. That's what the criticism is. If I look at it from its psychological impact, then I would say after 8 years of baloney, here's a man taking a step. Whether you call it an emergency brake or a baby step, you're all right. But this has a major impact on the psyche of this nation, that somebody is actually saying something that sounds like what the majority of this nation believes. So this is huge in my mind. It's not small. It's not a dud. It's not anything. This is massive, not just to his constituency or his donor base, but to anybody who's an American and holds that freedom of speech is important and that religious liberty is important. I think this is a really, really big deal. And it tells us a little bit about where Donald Trump's heart is at as an American in terms of wanting to protect those freedoms we hold dear. And that's what he ran on, and that's what he was elected for, and now he is, to the extent that he can do it. Now, the other thing is, there was a draft of this state that came out in February, which is much more detailed. And I think he shied away from it because he wanted this thing to go out there and just sit there. Mm-hmm. Let it have the psychological impact.
Marinate for a while.
Let it have the psychological impact it does have, but don't cause the legal issues. Now, there are some legal issues. The Freedom from Religion Foundation has already filed a lawsuit against this, saying that it's unfair to non-religious people or secular.
It's a stretch.
Not
they're
for profits.
having to find a
they're really having to stretch. But for me, I mean, I'll just be honest about me. When I read this thing, I said yes. That's something I can say yes to.
Robert, back to your point about the bully pulpit, but we also know, I think one thing that's interesting here is that we don't know where he is in his spiritual journey. It's really hard to kind of figure out with Donald Trump. But I think that's actually a plus in this case, because maybe this doesn't have to be the evangelical who is passing this law. It is somebody who recognizes that the American foundation of religious freedom of religious expression is important to protect.
Yeah, it's interesting. He's quite a mix. He's as much a libertarian as he is a conservative, and he's got liberal background too. So he's not that ideological, like we're used to. We're used to politicians just towing the line on these things, and so he's all over the place. But he is someone who believes in free speech, obviously, or free tweets, if not speech. I mean, he wants he literally is the most unpolitically correct president I think we've ever had. Now,
Yeah.
I don't go back that far,
But he doesn't
of
play-
the ones I'm
yeah.
familiar with, he is out of the box, and he it appears now he may be better at this than so good at it that we don't even notice how good he is at the political calculations.
Well, yeah. Well, that's the Sly Fox
See,
part.
that's
Yes,
the part we don't know about. But
yeah.
just on the surface, on the apparent, I believe this is. I know that the people that put this together worked with. He doesn't sit down and put this stuff together. He has people
Yeah,
that
that's right.
that
That's
does
people.
this kind of stuff, and the people that put this stuff together are true believers.
Well, now you also have in the idea of freedom of speech and freedom of religious expression, there also the right to act like children, which is this story that also comes out of a academy. Where is this? Their school,
Pennsylvania.
In Pennsylvania, principal slams Jesus. It's a public school. We don't believe in that here. And among other things. And on Wednesday, two Christian pro-life activists protested abortion outside of a STEM academy, science, technology, engineering, math. The assistant principal told them to leave, but they persisted in exercising their First Amendment rights. Well, the principal here, this assistant principal, just began to curse, and they began to speak in language that would have that should any parent ought to say, really? This is our leadership here, and just saying that no, it's science. It's all about science, and then, but again, you kind of protect his right to be a child.
Cussing like a 7th grade teenager.
Doesn't mean he has to keep his job, but it doesn't allow him to act like a child. So that's our freedoms here. We'll have more to come in a moment here on Faith Matters on the talk station FM 107 and AM 1240. Welcome back to Faith Matters on the talk station FM 107 and AM 1240. Thanks for making us a part of your Sunday morning. We appreciate that. And I'm Ben Ball, along with Reverend Robert Cornegie, Bishop Doc Loomis, and Reverend Carl Zarowski, as we talk about another issue that is before us. A couple of different articles. First one from the Washington Post. It's a worldviews analysis by Fatima Boujami. Says ISIS is on the decline in the Middle East, but its influence in Pakistan is rising. And also, as a sort of companion piece of this from PJ Media, is about what we kind of talked a little bit about this last week, about a move towards ISIS in the United States. ISIS to jihadists use fake apartment job Craigslist ads to lure hostage and murder victims. And that's, again, a terror practice that we're going to examine here. But this first article about ISIS on decline in the Middle East begins with when... well, I'm going to skip a little bit of this. This talks about a woman who decided to join Daesh. Is that how they say it? Daesh, or, well, in the South we say Daesh.
Daesh.
Okay. And the 20-year-old medical student and now in Syria for jihad stopped searching for me. Noreen Lagari, who disappeared from her hometown, has been in contact with extremists online for a year, was actually in the Pakistani city of Lahore. In April, security forces stormed her hideout there, killing one of her two accomplices, whom she had also married, and recovering 2 suicide vests and hand grenades. Lagari had planned to detonate herself at a crowded church 2 days later on Easter Sunday. It was the latest example of the Islamic State growing reach in Pakistan. We've talked about how maybe ISIS is on the decline on the battlefield in some of these areas, whether it's Mosul or you're looking at some other places where there's actually battle fronts and kind of defined lines and claimed territory. But that's never been where the terror, not never, but it's not been the only place where terror lies, Doc. And this is something about what ISIS may continue to do long after we may eliminate any kind of person who says they're in charge.
Well, sure. Golly, this is such a complex issue, and I don't think most Americans really understand ISIS, Daesh, ISIL, the Taliban, the Al-Qaeda.
Al-Qaeda.
I mean,
Al-Qaeda
I think
in
it all
Iraq.
kind of blends together, and people aren't sure which one we're talking about at any given time. And I'm not going to offer a primer on it, but the bottom line is you've got three basically Sunni organizations in Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, and ISIS, who are looking for some level of world and regional domination. And people, especially leaders, they move in among those groups from time to time. And so what's really happened is you had the Mujahideen in Pakistan was largely made up of the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. And now what ISIS is doing is basically recruiting out of those groups. And so they're kind of what's really happening in Pakistan is people are changing uniforms. It's not that it doesn't really look to me like there's any more terrorists there, although there's more terrorism because ISIS is a more terrorist-based organization. But basically what they've done is they've come in and they've convinced the jihadis, the Mujahideen, to become ISIS members and leave the Taliban and Al-Qaeda behind. But still, we're talking about somewhere between two.
There's a long history of that with the
yeah, especially in the Sunni groups, and we're really only talking about somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 actual warriors.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not a really big deal.
But that's also, isn't that kind of our Western perspective, is that we look at numbers as being a measure of strength, instead of this woman was ready to go into a church on Easter Sunday and blow herself up. She was one. And that would have been the headline, and that would have been the news, because that has power to it more than even saying killing 300 ISIS fighters on the battlefield.
Because what they're looking for is they are looking to make a statement about terror and instill fear in people more than they are worrying about how many bodies they're going to get. Their whole goal is to terrify people. And, we've heard it said before that, fighting against groups like this, it's a war unlike any battle we've ever fought. Right now, we've got ISIS and these terrorist groups to deal with. We've got North Korea. Two very, very different things. I mean, this is a war unlike any we'd ever seen. There are no battlefronts or anything like this. It's almost like you want to grab them and say, look, if you want to fight with us, you've got to fight by the rules. And they say, no, we don't fight by the rules.
It kind of reminds you of the Brits and the colonials in America and the guerrilla tactics of the, we didn't fight by the European model.
Right. We didn't wear red coats.
And I mean, to a degree, we had a formal army, but, the most effective way was to snipe and
right.
go in. And so this has been around a long time, but we were fighting to protect our homes. They're fighting for an ideology that they're advancing. They believe that Allah, everyone will submit to Allah eventually. And so they are willing to sacrifice everything. And other Muslims who are not as devout as them. We've had discussions about this, about how, the so-called moderates are really intimidated.
They're apostates.
Exactly, and they're targets, and so so they're using new strategies, and the internet is one of their biggest ones. Social media. It is amazing how they've adapted this from just for us. It's just sort of a play, what I had for lunch, and where I'm going next weekend, and that kind of thing. They're using it as a weapon. They've weaponized the internet, and now they're going on Craigslist. They give tutorials on how to blow up things and make explosives, and how to terrorize and torture.
Well, that's
lure people in for these things. It's
scary.
We are just so clueless about this.
This is part of this other article here, too, again from PJ Media, about the Islamic State magazine. How do you pronounce that magazine? Rumiyah? 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 Rumi magazine, distributed online in 10 languages, including English, offers an installment on just terror tactics, including praising lone jihadists, including U.S. terrorists who have set heroic examples with their operations. Talks about taking hostages. Would-be terrorists are told not to hold large numbers of kafar, meaning the apostate hostage, in order to negotiate one's demands, but to sow terror with language of force, language of killing, stabbing, slitting throats. They were talking about how the Craigslist thing comes in, is to put up ideas of apartments for students.
Right.
And then use that to lure someone to kidnap or to murder and to create terror.
You know, the sad thing is, it's not just the terrorists that are doing this. I mean, there are criminals doing this on Craigslist and others as well. I'm not trying to label Craigslist as a criminal enterprise at all, but there are eBay. I mean, there are people that are always going to manipulate these systems.
But part of the danger is here, while we see, again, ISIS maybe be retreating or losing ground on the battlefield, they're gaining strength in what is terror and going into some other areas
globally.
And here's an example when we've read a couple of things even recently where somebody has committed a heinous crime, screaming Allah Akbar, but we consider it to be an anomaly that they have. Authorities look at it as being, well, the guy was crazy.
Right.
He was just crazy, and he has a history of being crazy, and nobody expected it. Nobody saw it coming. It was just
criminal intent,
yeah,
rather than terrorist intent.
And so what they're encouraging is people to be crazy, and people to do one act that will further their cause, supposedly. So through this, it's dangerous.
It's interesting how many. There are a couple of women in our articles today whose lives are being followed, as they become jihadis. And it's interesting that there has been these groups have been around since late 80s, early 90s. Taliban in 88, I think Al-Qaeda 94, 93. So it's interesting, though, that only recently have we seen this kind of rise in women. We almost expected that in the U.S. Remember the San Bernardino killer it was he and his wife or whomever.
Right.
But now what we're beginning to see is women taking the red eye over there and joining up. And it's interesting because I would love to come to an understanding of how in a society where women's rights are so significantly suppressed, the women have decided to rise up and become a significant part of this. It's like in our country when feminism came about, women were trying to become priests or CEOs, and now they're trying to become mass destruction delivery systems over there.
Yes, maybe it's precisely because they can't become the other.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I would love to do a psychological study and understand why women would rise up in this. Carl knows. I don't know. I would love to know. What is it, Carl? Why are they doing it? Carl understands nothing of women, and neither do any of us in this room, do we?
No. But what I get from especially this second article, where there's this online magazine that's telling people how to instill fear and terror. We're pastors. Are we trying as hard to tell people to instill love in their fellow man?
More to come in a moment on Faith Matters on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. Welcome back to Faith Matters on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. Thanks for joining us here again on this Mother's Day, this Sunday morning, as we are joined by Reverend Robert Cornegie and Reverend Bishop Doc Loomis, and also Reverend Carl Zarowski, as we talk about some of the things of the day, articles of the day. This one comes from Episcopal News Service and came out last week, called Church Organists Arrested in Post-Election Vandalism at Episcopal Congregation in Indiana. When the vandalism first took place, this made some national news. It was part of what we were seeing in some elements around the country after Donald Trump was elected president, there would be vandalism taking place in certain places. And this one was examples of Heil Trump was spray painted on the side of the church. There were other slurs that were put up, a gay slur and a swastika. And as it turns out, it was the work of the organist of St. David's Episcopal Church here in Bean Blossom, Indiana. And he's been working there as a paid part of the staff for some years. His name, Nathan Stang, faces a misdemeanor count of institutional criminal mischief. And it seems to be pretty clear by his own statements and turning himself in and how the church is treated as that he thought that he might be able to create the kind of disturbance that people would rise up against what he thought was the insensitivity or the incorrect movement of the country. I don't know what he thought he might accomplish. Doc, did you get a picture of that?
Yes.
Okay.
So when he does the interview with the newspaper, he says that he wanted to mobilize a movement after being disappointed. But then later on, when he's actually interviewed by the paper in detail, he says, well, I guess one of the driving factors behind me committing the act was that I wanted other people to be scared with me. In other words, when Trump was elected, he became scared, and he was unable to deal. He's a single gay man. He was unable to process this with his family, he said, and so he just became scared. And he said, well, if I'm going to be scared, I'm going to get a bunch of, because this is the thing. This is how we build unity in liberalism. Let's all get scared. It's like going to a scary movie together. It's that unity you have at a thriller. You're all scared. So let's get everybody really scared, and then we can all be really close, and we'll have something to talk about, and we can cuddle.
A commonality.
A commonality of being scared. And that's sad that that's what it's come to, and that's what this poor young man is about.
Well, as some of the comments noted, it was what's called a false flag operation, where they pretended to be something else than what they were, and this is just sad. I mean, Carl, there's no way around it, really. I think it's emblematic, though, of how some issues have been presented to be scary.
Right. I agree with you, and I find it sad too that this church organist chose to vandalize the church where he was the organist, where he was a part of this congregation, and the fact that he painted a gay slur on the building. And the church advertises itself as an inclusive church that welcomes gay couples. He really harmed some of the people in that church, some of the people that he's there worshiping beside every Sunday. Those are very hurtful words that he painted on their building.
Robert?
Well, yeah, it's, when you start demonizing the opposition, this is an outworking of that process where you start saying that the end justifies the means. And so in this case, he was saying that, the threat of this administration personally upon him and others in his community was so severe that you could actually go into a false flag, or you can create. It justifies creating this fake news. Basically, if you want to know what fake news is, this is it. I mean, there's news, but this is not a real thing that happened. This is something that came out of his mind, and it's the problem we see in our political situation where everything has been politicized. Everything, to the point that it doesn't matter if you're a Christian, doesn't matter if you're in a church, it doesn't matter. The enemy has gotten so inflated in they're seeing a Trump demon behind every tree. We talk about that.
Yeah,
you're giving the enemy too much credit. frankly, for being able to do these things.
Where they're tying in what they oppose to everything that they do.
Everything.
So,
And so suddenly your sexual proclivities trumps, pardon the pun, everything else. And it justifies you doing these absurd, illegal things.
Well, did you read what the bishop said, the newly consecrated bishop of Indiana? She said, we're living now in a political climate that is so divisive and highly charged that people from all across the political spectrum are making thoughtless and hurtful choices that they believe are justified by the righteousness of their causes. Yeah. That's Jennifer Baskerville Burroughs.
But then she also concludes, though, as people who follow Jesus,
right,
we must find a different way. Yeah, but I think one of these, whether it's demonizing Trump or going to be some other issue, the problem is that we have this idea that, well, we cannot work to either some level of understanding or agree to disagree, or and Doc, you had said earlier in a segment about this is a president who is much more libertarian, not an ideologue. I mean, or you had said that, Robert? Is that this is but this is the president who doesn't oppose LGBT.
Exactly.
Rights. I mean, the only reason this community, and I know many part of that community that became so scared, is because of what they were told that he represents.
That's right. This is the meme. This is it. And so, literally, there were people after the election scared. They had gotten themselves into this irrational place because of the hype, all of the political hype that went on in this. And plus, the fact that the enemy is at work. Mm-hmm. He loves this stuff.
But the irony of it, is the people who are exploding nightclubs where gays hang out is ISIS. The guy who wants to stop ISIS is Trump.
Right.
So who are you going to be afraid of? Wow, this is bizarro. And the enemy loves every minute of it. You're right.
Right. And once again, I think we're led by lots of misinformation, lots of people who just cannot understand that there are multiple sides to a story, and we need to report facts. And again, as you said, fake news or whatever you want to call it, it's just misrepresentation. And Carl, this is what influences a lot of ideas, whether people want to fly out to Pakistan and join ISIS, or they're influenced by bad messaging.
Right. Bad messaging. And, I look at this and I see this as another example that people just aren't communicating at all anymore. With everything being this divided, you've got this fellow who is afraid of what's going to happen if Trump gets elected. You've got other people who are happy that he gets elected. Is there any discussion going on between the two? No, there's no interaction. There's only headbutting going on between the two. And where did this guy get the information that Trump was going to destroy the way of life for LGBTQ people?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, I mean, that's why when you have your reality based on feelings and this bubble that we have all started living in, we all have our little bubbles where the news we read, the comments we see online, everything is in our bubble. Mm-hmm. And then if we're not broadly reading from different sources, different perspectives, this is where you go. This is where the ends become so terrifying that you will do anything, and that's terrorism.
Right, and what we're doing is we're turning into a nation where people's idea of truth is based upon somebody else's emotion.
Correct.
Right. And I know, frankly, I have a very difficult time watching national news broadcasts now at all.
Right.
I mean,
I do too.
And even Fox, I can't have a harder time watching them because they seem to have gotten so agenda driven in one way or another. I go to international sources and look at the cricket scores, but eventually I'll get to some other news that's happening around the world.
Well, feelings are so manipulative and can be manipulated easily, and they change. And and if you're holding on to these feelings as though they are what is real, you've got a real problem. That's why the Lord said, the truth is what sets you free. It's not your feelings that set you free. Now, He gave us feelings for a purpose, as warning signs. These are the red flashing lights, the red flags in our lives, these feelings that we have, but they should drive us to find the truth that's at the basis of reality. Truth is that which corresponds to reality. And if you're living in this little unreal world that he was living in, it's anything goes.
Yeah, and there's much more to discover past what you're being told. I mean, and we have to watch out too, as we get passed along messages. When somebody forwards us something else, we have to track that down and say, is this really true or not?
It's called due diligence, isn't it?
And that's why our listeners are here on Sunday morning to get the news the way it was meant to be.
Absolutely.
So all three of you, get on your phones, call your friends, and ask them to tune in with you at 8 o'clock on Sunday mornings.
More to come in a moment. And welcome back to Faith Matters here on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. And thanks for joining us here on this Sunday morning. And let's take a look at one more article here. I'm Ben Ball along with Reverend Robert Cornigan, Bishop Doc Loomis, and Reverend Carl Zorowski. And we take a look at this one is called, it's from Crossroads Today. It actually from an ABC TV station. And it's an Associated Press article out of Berlin. It says, feeling nervous before your flight? Travelers at one German airport can now receive spiritual solace by entering a booth and listening to a prayer in their choice before boarding the plane. The airport's German airport offers prayer booth in 65 languages. The prayer booth at Stuttgart Airport's Terminal 3 features 300 prayers from various religions in 65 different languages, airport spokesman Johann Schumann said on Friday. Often passengers still have a bit of time before their departure at the gate. The prayer booth is an offer by the airport's chaplains to provide a moment of contemplation. I don't know, guys. Where do we go with this, Doc? What do you think? Would you is your quarters ready for this? I don't know what you have to do to.
Do you have to pay? Do you pay for this?
No, it's free.
No, it's free.
Oh, it's free prayer.
I wonder if they have a donation slot or something, collection plate.
I wonder if it sounds like Siri. I have a prayer for you. Or whether they're actually recorded by the real folks.
I would think it's
obviously we save
pre-recorded.
We save these ridiculous things till the end of the show because we figure at this point you're in your car driving to church.
And this is the last thing.
This is the most fun you're going to have this morning. So, but this whole thing,
it is called a Pray-o-Matic.
It's everything.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Listening to the radio is going to be better than you just said that this would be the most fun they'd have all morning. What about church?
Yes, that's not supposed to be fun. We're supposed to be fun. We're supposed to get you ready, and then you go to church and repent. That's what we do.
This is where we need that laughter.
You go to church and pray for us.
Well, I pray for you.
I think this is wonderful. Tibetan monk chants, Hindu Hare Krishna chants, Buddhist sutras, the shamans from New Guinea, Mali, even this is the American contribution.
I got a laugh track.
The American contribution to this booth is American TV preachers.
It's like Joel Osteen, I'm sure, is in the mix.
Probably. This is absolutely fun, isn't it? I mean, and you see somebody come out of the booth, and they're like, I mean, if there was a booth and it said, come here and hear prayers, wouldn't you? I would sit like 20 feet away and just watch the booth because I'd want to see how people came out. Oh, no.
How they went in.
Yeah.
How they came out.
And did they come out, woo, woo.
Before and after.
Yeah, I'd like Baskin Robbins. Like, I go in and really upset, and then when I come out, I'm like, wow, this is great. So I wonder if that booth really shoots them out in a happy mood.
Yeah. I mean, those African Pentecostal prayers, man, they are awesome. So that would be the happy place.
Well, the other thing is, did you notice it's offered by the airport chaplains? Because the one thing you see at an airport, you see a lot of chaplains running around really overworked.
Yeah.
So Every time I see a chaplain at an airport, he or she just is sweating, running from gate to gate. But so because we're so overworked, let's
for
put
a lot
this
of
booth
people that pre-flight checklist. This is added to the checklist now because this is a teachable moment. So,
there's
I hope they're careful with this.
Yeah, no doubt that there's a lot of prayer that takes place right before takeoff. But the part here too, they had monotheistic faiths, polytheistic religions, and animist beliefs are also included. There are some prayers that I would just want to be curious. I'd be curious to hear.
Yeah.
You buy the 6-pack. You can get any 6 of your favorites.
It's a flight.
They play them in order.
It's a flight of prayers.
Multiple choice.
Yeah.
For those of you who are wondering where Carl is, he is scratching his head over here.
But Carl, look, the thing is, there'd be one thing if they were offering actually just a blank booth or something that would be, here's an area where you can have some time alone and you can contemplate, bring your Bible, whatever, maybe, if you have that, and you have an area where people pray. That's different from
Yes, it is.
let me pick B16. Like it's a jukebox.
Yeah. Random prayer.
Well, I look at this. There's a lot of issues with this, okay? But in another sense, I have to admire somebody being willing to step out and do this.
Oh, I'm fine with them if they do it, but who chooses the prayer? What prayer is it? This is the, I just wonder what the reaction is to any of the prayers that are being offered.
Well, that's true. I find it interesting
and
too.
Can I get a job reading them?
That the guy who designed this, it says he's also designed several prayer booths in recent years that have been installed at schools, universities, and museums. Can you imagine us trying to put one of these into a school here?
In 65 languages and 300 different religions represented, maybe we could.
Yeah,
might be able to do that.
That's the way to crack that nut right there, buddy.
Yeah.
It's funny. It's a former photo booth, and they have a photograph.
Yeah, if you go in with a friend, you can get a
take your
photograph.
picture.
That's right.
But it looks like a photo. they talk about the design of this thing, and there's a photo. I wish you could see this because it looks exactly like a photo booth.
Yeah,
and it's red, and it's got Pray-o-Matic or Pray-o-Matic. Pray-o-Matic written on the side of it.
Oh my gosh.
And it is just amazing, yeah.
But again, I would be curious about listening to different ones. So I wonder if you have a time limit. Are you allowed one prayer and gone? Yeah.
I don't see anything occupied. Where you. I guess you just pull the curtain back and see if somebody's in there, and
if you're kind of struggling between religions, you get to.
Or can you
choose a few different ones.
You're going to get on your plane, and you've heard about this particular airline, and as you walk up to the gate, you see a line of 60 people waiting to go into
the prayer booth.
Well, that's at United Airlines.
Yeah.
United is installing these right now.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
They're all praying that they make it out to the tarmac.
So there's no profit center in this?
No, I don't think so.
Really, there is no. I didn't read that there was no charge, but your guys are telling me
it's
there's no
free.
charge.
It's only going to be there for 3 months, I think, is what they said.
What then?
Yeah, why?
What?
That's all.
They expire? The prayers expire?
I think this is a test.
It's sort of like, but it's like Google. They have an "I feel lucky" button. You could just take a random prayer, random language. Or can you translate any of the prayer? Well, you can translate any of the religions apparently into English. So.
Oh, is that right?
I think so.
This is pretty sophisticated little deal here, but
somebody had to sit down and read them all. Or like you said, then maybe they are just taking them, editing them off of TV shows and other source material. So until somebody goes in and sues them on a copyright infringement.
Well, the good news is the artist, the guy that did this thing, who could not immediately be reached for comment. Well, clearly he was in his prayer booth. The artist who could not immediately be reached for comment writes on his homepage that all prayers are real prayers of believers gathered in worship prayer rooms and homes. So he didn't make up prayers, he got real ones. I don't even know what that means.
Well, I
mean, it's like, so they were like live prayers. Like he snuck into places where he like recorded actual live, real prayers.
So he was a prayer detective, I guess.
So it includes the Lord's Prayer, the Shema.
And the Shema, yeah.
And the call to prayer, Islamic call to prayer, the Hare Krishna, chants, Buddhist sutras, prayers of shaman.
I wonder if it's the Beatles version of the Hare Krishna chant, or whether it's the actual one.
Yeah, or does it have? Does it have the? And do some go on and on and on like we know some pastors do? I mean, they just keep on going.
And when you get done with the prayer, there's a button that says "I'm not convinced," and if you hit that, it replays it until you get it. This is pathetic. We have 4 more minutes in this segment, and we're never going to be able to get out of it. This is when we should talk about Chick-fil-A or something.
Well, next time you fly into Stuttgart, you've got 3 months to experience this because it's in the airport there at Stuttgart.
Yeah, call us. Let us know how it goes. We want to know how it works.
Then they'll ship them out to other airports and other places. So it's going to be a tour. So, but I have to think. I've never heard of certain prayers in some other faiths. Never heard them. So that'd be kind of interesting to see. Just to hear, it'd be a good experiment, if nothing else. But I guess it's just basically a giant YouTube. Be able to select one. But I don't know that we always want our people to be deeper in their prayer. So is this just another? We were talking about baptism off the air, But is this just another example of? Is this like a drive-by baptism? Is this just a drive? Is a lazy? Cheap grace here of going in and hearing a prayer that it's not in context to any scripture. It's not in context to a particular message or life.
It can be viewed that way, but let's say there's somebody that goes into that booth and they're seeking, they're searching. And they hit the button in there and they hear a prayer and they hear about Jesus and something clicks. Can God use this to reach somebody? Sure he can. And this booth could become a means of grace.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if the chaplain at the airport is hanging around. Does he have is he the guy that's sitting there watching what goes on? And
could be.
Being able to, hopefully respond in some way to someone that comes out weeping or whatever, that occurs.
Well, we're prayerful of that.
Yeah. I mean, look, God can use anything.
And that's going to do it for us for today on Faith Matters on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240.
Faith Matters is a production of the Talk Station.